Okay, I'd like to call the special meeting of the Rules and City Government Committee to order. Please note for the record, Alderman Arnett and Alderman Savage are present, in addition to Alderman Payon, Alderwoman Tierney, and our city manager, Mr. Gerald, and our city attorney, Mr. Lyles, and several others who will be introduced, I'm sure, as we progress through the meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the agenda with the amendment of moving 044-20 to the end in consideration of Alderman Schonmeyer's schedule.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the agenda as written, as amended, please say aye.
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 Thank you. First item on our agenda is the Audit Committee, 045-20.
Don't we have to approve minutes?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. And there's something else before. I'm just ready to jump into the legislation. I do apologize.
Move approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Alderman. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes from the December 1st meeting, please say aye.
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 Okay, thank you. And then we have appointments and reappointments of committees. The appointment of Commissar Brown to the Arts and Public Places Commission. Mr. Jakes is Mr. Brown, I'm sorry, available? Mr. Brown, could you unmute yourself?
Yes.
Can we see you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought my video was showing. How you guys doing?
Well, that's good. Hi, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you all as well.
So welcome to the Rules and City Government Committee. You have been recommended for the Arts and Public Places Committee. So tell us a little bit about yourself and why you think you would be a good fit for this committee.
I'm an Annapolis resident, graduated from Annapolis High School. I moved out when I was 17 years old. I moved to Atlanta on my own. I attended the Art Institute of Atlanta. I stayed in Atlanta for about 5 or 6 years. I received my bachelor's degree in graphic design there. I came back home. I've been fully engaged with several nonprofit organizations, several workshops and different community leaders here in the DMV area. And I've done several art courses, different workshops to teach the youth, and also adults as well. I've been working on getting a certification in art therapy. And while doing so, I've been also just telling different people and sharing my story of how art has helped change my life. I've been able to inspire others to become creative or tap into their creative side, I should say. I've been able to create my own business, which is Sell Spitfire Paintings and Designs, which focuses around graphic design, fashion design. I've been doing some stationery work. I've created over 350 logos for different businesses around the U.S. I'm currently lead fashion designer for Tunnel Vision, which is a local sporting apparel brand here in Maryland. And I'm also the lead designer for Lamar Jackson's clothing line Era 8 Apparel as well, which I just produced most of his clothing here over the summer and the winter that just passed. But I just have a long resume of all different types of art, ranging from different mediums, textures, you name it. I'm still currently seeking different types of art to add to my resume as well. I'm currently in a handwriting drawing class. So it's just never ending with me. I've always wanted to push myself to learn more and more about art history, and also push the narrative forward and taking art to a new level with my creative abilities.
Is that all?
Well, I have to tell you that, was it a year ago that I interviewed you or longer?
No, it was about a year ago.
About a year ago, I interviewed him on our TV station. and learned about all the wonderful things that he's doing in and around Maryland and nationwide. And if you're a Ravens fan, you're doubly impressed. And so I am thrilled that you are bringing your talents to art in public places here in the city. So I want to say thank you in advance. Are there any questions for Mr. Brown?
I'm certainly impressed and overwhelmed. I would move we recommend approval.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'll second that motion. And thank you for your interest.
And we always thank everybody who volunteers. The city has an enormous number of talented people that volunteer their time, and I think it makes us a much better place to live in. So we thank you for volunteering.
No problem at all.
Well, Mr. Brown has been volunteering his time in the city for a long time. So now we're giving him an official capacity. So thank you. So the motion on the floor is that we give a favorable recommendation for Mr. Commissel Brown to the arts and public places. All in favor, please say aye.
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 That's a unanimous recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Brown. And we look forward to all the wonderful things you're going to be doing in our city. Appreciate it.
I look forward to meeting you all. Hopefully COVID will die down soon and we'll get all meet formally in person. But until then, I'm very thankful for the position. Thank you all for serving this wonderful city of Annapolis, and I can't wait to get started.
Hey, if you can make COVID go away, we'll make you mayor.
I've been luckily enough not to touch me and any close family members, man, but making it disappear, I don't know if I have that magic.
Well, he's definitely got magic, that's for sure.
Yes.
Mr. Brown, your name will go before the full council, I suspect, at the meeting on December 21st. Okay, so Ms. Raftovich will notify you after that's been taken care of.
Okay, thank you all as well.
Right, thank you.
All right, I appreciate you.
All right. Appreciate you.
All right, have a good one.
You too. The next item on our agenda is legislation before the committee. And our first item is 04520, the Audit Committee, for the purpose of clarifying the responsibilities of the Audit Committee members, specifying reporting requirements, providing for external and internal reporting services, providing program metrics, measurements, and evaluation, and generally relating to the Audit Committee. We began this discussion at the last meeting. I see Alderman Payon is with us, and I think we have amendments. Alderman Payon, would you like to speak to this again, or is there something new that we need to?
Madam Chair, if I might, we were discussing there is something new, and the committee is going to be taking up the performance management system, and I think that's a fabulous change in their or addition to their duties. I think we were about to discuss parallel construction with council standing committees and external commissions, and it was related to the discussion we had with the Affordable Housing Commission and changes we made there. And I think we were starting to get into the fact that this is something of a different kind of body than the external citizen populated commissions that are parallel. The parallel for the Finance Committee is the Financial Advisory Commission. I'm not sure there is a necessary parallel for this particular body, but that's where we were, and Alderman Payon was about to engage with us on that discussion.
Well, in my notes, I have an indication that we're moving from an internal audit versus a performance measures audit. Alderman Payon, is that the gist of what this legislation is doing? Alderman Payon, you're on mute.
You know, I'm so darn good at cutting out outside noises that I forget. But we're not cutting out the internal workings review by any means, but we are adding to that the performance measures. This is an ordinance that was largely crafted by members of my commission themselves. I edited and did some wordsmithing, as did Alderwoman Tierney. This was actually largely done by Mr. Kirshner and Cardillo on my committee. And I think it's a good piece of legislation. I think that it allows us to do some things that we've wanted to do from the beginning and we're not permitted to do. I thought we were permitted to do under a very general reading of the ordinance, but the former city manager through whom we had to go to, in all likelihood, to get money, disagreed and made it very clear that she was going to win that one, or we weren't going to get any money to do some of the things we wanted to do anyway. And you know, I'm not saying she was totally wrong by any means. I just chose to take a broader view of what the language was. This clears that up. I would note that in terms of spending council money, while it's true we do have a budget, the almost all the money we would be spending, not quite all, but almost all, would be for audits of internal processes. We've already had one. That is contracted through standard procurement procedures. There's no politics. There's no hiring, you know, my buddy or, you know, your buddy or anybody else. It goes through Brian Snyder's office. There was a committee. I was part of it, along with Brian and the city manager. And, you know, that's how we came up with the person that we did to do the initial audit. They were from Pennsylvania. They do municipal audits for other organizations. And yeah, I think we made a good choice, even if I wasn't totally happy with what they had to say. By the way, you will be getting copies of their audit report. It's taken a long time to get that out of finance, and I'm not being critical. There are reasons for that. But look, I think this is really good. There's no other committee, there's no other department that does what we propose to be doing. And we have a good deal of expertise on the committee right now. We have with us tonight Mr. Al Kirshner. He and, as I said before, he and Jim Cardillo really were the ones who put this legislation together. And Ellie and I smoothed it out at a couple of meetings, and along with the usual help from the law department. Look, I think it's a good piece of legislation. I think we can really be helpful to the city, and hope you folks support it.
May I call on City Manager Gerald to weigh in? I know one of the questions I had from the last meeting was the responsibility that's being placed on the city manager and the finance director to report regularly at the audit committee meetings.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Yeah, we're comfortable with that. As I mentioned last meeting, what we were uncomfortable with is when it said specifically that the city manager and the finance director shall attend all meetings, which means that if we weren't able to, that the meeting couldn't go forward. So that's been changed to allow designees to attend in our place. So I think that's fine. We do the same thing with the Financial Advisory Committee. These are valuable meetings for us to attend, and so we should be there, and we're happy to participate in them. So that, I think that answers that question. We're also supportive of this concept of looking at both internal audits as well as looking at performance measures. We think that's a good balance between sort of the push and pull between internal audits and performance audits. So I think if the committee meets with the departments, gets briefed by the departments on the performance measures, and then gets regular updates from the departments on how they're doing on the performance measures, that's a valuable service to the city. So I think the legislation is appropriate in that way.
Thank you. I saw Alderman Arnett's hand. You're on mute.
I'm trying to get the stupid thing to go off. Yeah, I wanted to talk about who the audit committee reports to. It's on page 2, subsection B, and it says reports annually or supplementally, I guess. Because the audit committee is going to be taking up a new thing, which I think is essential and I strongly support, which is our performance management system. I would hope that certainly we would hear from you around the time of the budget committee's work. And since Alderman Mayon, you're on the budget committee, we know where you are and we can ask you. But it does seem that this evaluation of performance in the performance management system is something that really needs to be going someplace on a regular basis to help us on the council understand what's going on. And I don't have a specific mechanism to recommend, but if you're going to do all that good work and analysis, it would be nice if it would fall on fertile ears so we can see what you're coming up with, and would be particularly germane during the budget making process time.
Alderman Payon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had changed that. Right now, we are required to report quarterly. And while we have attempted to do that, the fact of the matter is that from time to time, we just plain haven't had anything to report. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's not because we haven't done any work. There's simply nothing new. For example, in the summertime, we've got the month of August off. We report, we may or may not have had a meeting in July, depending on whether people are in town or not. That was the example that comes to mind. And it just seems like, writing an annual report was more practical and the more pragmatic way of doing it. However, having said that, of course, we're happy to report to the council in general. Obviously, the finance committee is part of that. More often if need be. There simply hasn't been the need to do that. That's the bottom line. It's not a big, to me. Well, I'm the one who put that in there. However, I've got to tell you, it's not that big a deal to me one way or the other. More than happy to inform the council anytime we come up with, anything that we feel everybody ought to know about. And I'm pretty liberal with that. If you want to, phrase it differently when we come to the council, that's in all likelihood going to be okay with me. I do have Mr. Al Kirshner here. Al, do you care to, Madam Chair, if I might take the liberty to call on Mr. Kirshner? Al, would you care to comment on that?
Well, just a few comments, just to put the whole thing in some sort of context. Let me start by saying it's good to see all of you. I haven't seen some of you in many, many months. So hello, and glad everybody's healthy. When we started this, of course, this was a new committee, and when we started, we really had to feel our way forward. Alderman Jared Littman, I believe, was the principal author behind the legislation to create the committee. And he had some very, very definite feelings, mainly based on his business experience. I come in from the other side, from the performance measurement side, as an educator and having a background in quality systems management. So we really had to feel our way forward. Julie Mossig, Jared, myself, we met and kind of wrestled over those points on the balance between financial audits and performance audits. I went into the Yellow Book, which is the generally accepted government auditing standards. And interestingly, That is about a 50-50 split. It gives equal weight, almost equal weight, to financial audits versus performance audits. My push all along has been there we'd have a number of financial audits that are routinely done by the city in accordance with Maryland state law, in accordance with some of the provisions of grants that we have. So I'm reasonably comfortable that nobody's walking out with wheelbarrows full of money or anything like that, stealing a lot of money, or that we have any major financial leakage. The analogy I've talked about in the past, to put it as an analogy, is if I came to each of you and said, hey, I'm running a mutual fund, we just had an audit and we came out squeaky clean, that's only half the question. The other question is, well, does your mutual fund make money? Is it a good investment? How is it performing? And that's where I believe the city has a very significant blind spot, or at least an open door. We really need to tie the budget process when department heads come to the budget committee, or the finance committee, excuse me, and ask for money. We should be treating that like an investment. They want the city to invest in their program because it's going to deliver a certain result. So that's why the performance audit thing is huge. This committee has $25,000 in its budget, which doesn't seem like much. I believe we can do a lot with that money by working with the departments, bringing in, at least this year, a consultant to help hold hands, help the department heads formulate good quality performance standards for each of their major programs. And again, my background in fire, you have the fire suppression, emergency medical services, fire inspection, fire prevention services. And each department probably has 3, 4, maybe 5 nuggets that really cover most of what their activities are. And if we build a set of performance standards for each of those, I think we can really streamline things and create a quality consciousness and a productivity consciousness down at the department level. So that's what's happened in our year and a half, 2 years working together. I think the committee has really evolved, and I think we really have a firm sense of where we want to go, and that's what's reflected in the legislation. So thank you.
Al, do you have any problem with our reporting more often than annually? I know we talked about that because we've had trouble getting reports out in a timely manner, because a lot of times it just really hasn't been much to report. And I don't have any problem with writing them more than annually. Do you?
It's no problem whatsoever. If there's nothing to report, we will report. There's nothing to report.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mute.
My phone was ringing. So Alderman Arnett's question in part had to do with the timing of the reports. While I don't think it's necessary to amend the legislation, I do think it's important that we indicate that we would like to have a report prior to the budget cycle.
That's fair.
Prior to the Finance Committee meeting beginning its work on the budget. So is that something that the committee would be willing to do without having to mandate it through the legislation?
Yes, absolutely. We're not far from that anyway, because in terms of annual report, we would probably be doing it in maybe February to March. We'll make an adjustment and be happy to do that. It's not a problem at all. Okay,
thank you. Alderwoman Tierney, as a member of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think what Alderman Arnett is asking is for this to be more of a dynamic review. And if the Audit Committee is doing their job and doing these performance evaluations, I don't think it should be stagnant. I think that input would be very valuable in the budget review period that takes several months. So I think we should be more fluid in the reporting, perhaps. I need help with this a little bit, Fred or Al. If I think that there might be valuable input that you need. So I just don't want to restrict.
I think it's very valuable. I think you're right. Yeah. Your point's a good one. No problem at all.
Sort of as a minimum, but as needed kind of thing.
Well, I think it's great that we work, to some extent, we work hand in hand with the Finance Committee, at least at budget time, at a minimum. I mean, we're not part of the Finance Committee. They're not part of us, but this is information that we can share that can be, I think, very helpful in reviewing the budget. I mean, somebody comes in here and they want X, Y, and Z extra money, and I'm looking at the performance, reports that we've been able to hopefully formulate, and it tells me that, well, maybe they didn't spend the money so well last year or something like that. Very few are going to say that, I'm quite sure. But if it did, I think that's something the Finance Committee needs to know about. And if, on the other hand, if they did a great job and really invested the money well, then obviously the Finance Committee needs to know about that. And I'm sure we're going to find more often than not that they've done a very credible job with the money that we've given them. So.
Okay.
My comment on that is, if I may. First of all, I just want to make sure we're not creating an impression that we, the Audit Committee, are doing audits. We've contracted for one audit. Right. We do not have sufficient funds to do another audit in the same posture we did last year. And what I want to do, or what I've been pushing for, and I think I've sent the point paper to most of the committee. I think I blind copied you, Alderman Arnett. And that is to drive down, kind of do what they do in the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, the Performance Excellence Program. I happen to live through the Coast Guard, and the idea was to drive into the culture performance excellence. Okay, so what we want to do is drive that into the culture. And what my proposal to the chair was, since we only have $25,000 for this year, and we did launch the first round of performance goals, setting performance goals, and we also on the spreadsheets, is to get a local consultant who is actually has quite a national reputation. I don't know that he would be interested in this, but I asked him as a favor if he would take a look at and just kind of give us, our committee, a little help. But the idea is get a consultant in to work with the department heads to really refine and make meaningful, measurable performance measures, and to show the department heads how do you collect this data? How do you review it? It's the data is no good unless you're having regular performance reviews. And I think many of you have already seen through my time on the Panelides transition team, I've got like a 2-page little form that we've used for years in many of my positions, and I've advocated it. And it's a simple elevator talk stuff that you would use as a program manager. What is the goal? What does this thing cost? When are results going to be seen? How do we know that we're done? I mean, a lot of programs in my federal government have lasted years and years and years beyond their expectation and their need, only because we never set an end date. We never sunsetted them. So again, what I think the next big thing for the Audit Committee is to set an agenda, a work plan, and we've got a proposal to the chair, formalize that work plan and get going, okay? I constantly remind people that the fiscal year is half over, okay? And we've really got a lot of work to do. This committee has the potential of making some important contributions to the performance of our city programs. So even with $25,000, we can make a difference and raise consciousness about performance of our city programs with the department heads. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirshner. Alderman Savage, I think I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I do like the idea that has been brought up about tying the reports with the fiscal year. But to be honest, I'm still not quite clear or sure in terms of where this committee fits. I think it could have a lot of value to not just the council, but the city at large. But I feel like I haven't really seen, I can't remember the last report that I've seen, but I'd have to really look at some of the stuff they've delivered and what they've done over the past few years to get a better understanding of exactly what the value is and what direction it would go. But again, I think it could potentially have quite a use. But so I'm also not sure that the council belongs on it. I mentioned this last time, and I've still just wrestled with it and are coming back with some concerns still. And I just, again, looking, I know the committee has done work to audit the rec department, but I'm not sure, and maybe this is a question for some of the members too, but I'm just not sure about the importance of having alderpersons on the committee itself. It would seem like possibly having more residents on the committee itself or a commission would be would allow it for some more things to get done. Auditing, I imagine, is quite a difficult task, and then you're talking about oversight of auditing contracts, which is another task in and of itself. I'm also a bit worried this infringes on some of the executive functions. And while that is the council's right to provide oversight in the delivery of services, that's in the code and the charter. But I'm not, does that, I mean, I guess this is a question for the city attorney. Does that include providing oversight on a formal contract like this? I'm a little unsure about that myself. I see he just came, Mr. Laws just tuned in. But so that'd be one question I'd have. I do have some amendments just to go along with the discussion about possibly removing the council from this audit committee. But again, I'm not set in stone on that. I'm just trying to get, that's just my inclination at the moment. But Madam Chair, would we be able to hear from the city attorney?
Yeah, let me call on Mr. Lyles to respond to the legal sufficiency, if that's the right terminology.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yeah, I'm here. I'm listening. I just take my face off so you guys can be more important as the discussion goes on. I think what this committee does, there is likely a hybrid function that does not necessarily disturb the principles that we discussed with respect to separation of powers. I think that the audit committee up to this point has done the kind of work that the council has said to do. And much of it is not executive, because at the end of the day, the audit committee provides information to the council. And other than working with the city manager in the awarding of a contract to do the auditing, the committee itself doesn't engage in executive functions. And so what it's going to be doing at the end of the day is recommending or advising on whether or not certain goals have been met and any changes that should be made. And that would be advisory, of course, to the council as well as to the city manager. Right now, I don't think we're close to those kinds of demarcations of activities yet that I could see.
I see our city manager is back with us. Not that you were ever gone anywhere, I know. But would you like to speak to the Alderman Savage's concerns about, the committee stepping into, what's your responsibility?
No, and I agree with the city manager. I think it's an oversight function, and I think that's appropriate for the council. As far as the mix between what I'll call civilian and older persons, I think as long as the committee has a budget and is going to be making decisions on contracts, that there should be older persons involved. But the outside people provide a whole level of expertise that I'm not sure resides within the council. And so there's a huge benefit to having people like Mr. Kirshner and Mr. Cardillo on this committee. And we're adding new people. We just added one at the last meeting. We're adding one at the next meeting who have tremendous expertise in the audit area. So it'd be a real loss if we gave up their participation in this commission, because they truly are the subject matter experts on audit and oversight.
Mute.
Sorry, phone keeps ringing. Mr. Gerald, could you also speak to the significant role of the alderman? I know Alderman Littman had written us a letter endorsing keeping council members on this committee.
Yeah, and maybe the members could talk to that as well. I do think it's important, and I think principally right now, while the commission gets a budget, that there be alderpersons involved with that management of the budget. I don't think we give a budget to any just strictly outside commission, not that I'm aware of anyway. So I think that's an important role that the alderpersons fill to make sure that that money is properly managed and properly spent.
Thank you. Mr. Kirshner, yeah. And then Savage.
Okay. I concur with what the city manager and city attorney have said so far. And there is a great synergy that's derived by having council members and citizens with specialization working together. We are a hybrid thing. I kind of look at us as like the old General Accounting Office, which is now called the Government Accountability Office. We're out there. We can operate very quickly. We can bring in the right kinds of people to help. And I feel like the departments come to the finance committee every year. They ask for money. They make certain promises. They make assurances. They set goals. And we need to get somebody out there and have design a system that gets a second look at, are they really performing as they, I don't want to say testified. I don't know if they're under oath, but they came to the council, they asked for money, the council made the investment, and now is the time that we need to have a system in place that basically goes out and double checks and see how we're doing. And the other thing is, it's not at the end of the year that we want to see how they're doing. We want to see the progress all along. And if a program may have a flaw in its strategy or something comes along that impacts how the program is going to deliver results, if we have quarterly reviews at the department level, that stuff will float to the top very, very quickly and allow the department heads and the people with the expertise in the department to make the programmatic changes based on their expertise and get things redirected and make the mid-course corrections. So we can have I am very confident and I'm very, very excited about the future for this committee. Small as our budget is, I think we can do great things. And again, I think you'll see a shift from having external audits to building a culture that focuses on productivity, on program management, and delivering performance excellence and good results. Thank you.
You have the biggest budget of any committee.
Fire one.
Will be.
Sorry, Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, and I guess just following up on that, I think it'd be helpful maybe from the commissioner, Mr. Kirshner, who's here, or the chair, but just I'd like to get a better understanding, because like Alderman Arnett said, this committee has the largest budget of any of the committees. What are some of the things? I mean, this committee's been around since I've been on the council, so 4+ years, I guess. What are some of the things that you've accomplished? Have you done any? I know there was an audit of the rec department. What else has been done? Anyways, I think it's important to make sure we justify the existence of this committee as well. It looks like it's going in a different direction with this legislation, but just to get a better understanding for myself.
Well, we have conducted or overseen an audit being conducted. That's the main thing that we've done, but we've also set up a number of other things. We have a hotline, a fraud hotline. We have had a number of other discussions, and I think made some decisions that have led to some changes that have been made, relatively minor ones at this point. We were handicapped initially in terms of how we read the statute and the authority that we had. And we just plain didn't get any cooperation from the then administration. And that's changed. It was, I can't tell you how frustrating it was as chairman, because we're trying to get something off the ground and get it moving. And honestly, getting this off the ground has been a major accomplishment, in my humble opinion. Al, do you have anything to add to that?
I guess we've all heard what's beaten to death in team building and organizational development when they say there's forming, norming, storming, norming, and performing. Okay, so we got together. It's been about 2 years. We formed. We were not in harmony on what we were going to do, how we were going to do it. We didn't even understand the subtleties of the legislation. I think about 2 or 3 months into it, I found the performance requirements in the city code that nobody seemed to know about. That kind of jarred things a little bit and gave a little more emphasis to the area that I felt was important, and that's performance measurement. So, yeah, it's been long, it's been hard, and there are times it hasn't been a lot of fun. But we are really postured right now, and I'm looking as we were talking, I was listening. I will send you, Alderman Savage, the point paper that I wrote. I thought I included you, that told how we would approach our work with a $25,000 budget, because only having $25,000 to do an audit is impossible. So we felt kind of neutered for a while. But there is a great potential to bring in some help for the department heads. This goes hand in hand with what the city manager has implemented with his performance management system. And I think there's a great opportunity for some synergy and to make a very meaningful difference. And if you have questions, I'll be glad to meet with you and spend some time back briefing you. And I can email you loads and loads and loads of things on performance excellence from both the Coast Guard, the Baldridge program. And, it's one of the things that they used to say to us in performance measurement is, if you got in the elevator with the Commandant of the Coast Guard, he says, "How's it going?" And you said, "Good." His next question is, "How do you know that?" And I also had, when I worked at one point for the Secretary of the Army, and we had the balanced scorecard type approach. And we had cascading measures. And when you have an army of 500,000 people and about 250,000 civilians, there's a lot going on. And you have to collect and aggregate this data that we used to have these, they're like 40 dots on a chart. And if the name of the game was to have all of them green, you wanted all green dots. But we can do that. And I think there's a great opportunity, again, for our little tiny budget to bring somebody in and kind of set up a system and bring somebody in to help the department heads. We really need to institutionalize performance excellence in this city. Okay.
Yeah, there are many other things that $25,000 can be used for besides auditing. And Al's brought up a couple of them. Now that I think about it, I can't tell you how long it took us just to get a contract for the audit that we had done. Once it was done, I mean, what's it been, Al? A year since we've had the audit in our hands, and we're still not I mean, Jody, I think, has finally stopped going back and forth with them, and we hopefully can give the audit results to you folks.
Yeah, I mean,
we've moved at a snail's pace, and not necessarily for anything that the committee has or hasn't done. It's just been tough slogging.
Right. It's been a learning curve. I mean, we went out and did that audit. We built a scope of work. We went through the procurement process. It was a little slower than we had wished for.
How about Glacial?
Yeah, and then the company that performed the audit, this was their first time out of the box with us. They had a couple of rough edges, and they had a couple of things that they left off. That audit process by the contractor took longer than expected. And again, it's an iterative process. We saw the final report. I don't think any of us were thrilled by it. I mean, it's not that the contractor did a bad job. It was some holes along the way and some lessons that had to be learned. Our first time out of the box, we learned some lessons about our scope of work.
Yep.
So again, it's been a long learning process, and I think the way forward has become a lot more clear, and the legislation reflects what we think we need.
Thank you. Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It seems to me we're having a change in mission, which I subscribe to and will be willing to recommend favorably on. And it does not seem like it's the time to change the players also. Would change two things. We're not going to know if things go well, what made it go well, and if things go poorly, what made it go poorly. My only concern in this regard, and I do look forward to Alderman Savage's amendments if they're forthcoming, is that we be parallel in how we treat all of these situations. And I feel, given what the city attorney has told us today and the comments from the city manager, that we probably ought to go back and rethink where we are with the Affordable Housing Committee, because we did take alderpersons off of that committee. And part of it was because we wanted to have citizens operating without the over influence of alderpersons. But here it's fine, and maybe they aren't the same situation. And I know that's not part of this legislation, but I am uncomfortable that we're sort of going one direction with one thing and another direction with another. But at this point, pending amendments from Alderman Savage, I would move that the committee recommend favorably to the city council this legislative change.
Is there a second? Then I will second that motion. Alderman Savage, do you have amendments to present today?
Yeah, I emailed them at before the last meeting. Sorry, I forgot to send them to the law office, but I also wasn't entirely sure what the committee would decide. So in any case, I will, once I find out where I am, I will send those back out to you right now. And I'd be happy to second that motion too, because similar to what Alderman Arnett said, from what I've heard tonight, and thank you all for the information, Mr. Kirster and Alderman Payon, I like the redirection that I'm hearing in terms of oriented on some of the performance standards, but I still have concerns about. I still have some concerns about the council being on there. I think it would have value as an all-citizen board, and also I'm concerned about politics getting inserted in there in the future. Not that it's happening right now, but there's always the potential when you have elected officials on there.
Alderman, it's been moved and seconded already. So are you going to introduce amendments today, or are you going to wait and introduce them on the floor?
Yes, I said I'm going to send those to you right now.
I actually just sent them. I just sent them to you guys.
Oh, you did? Thank you.
I did. Mm-hmm.
Okay, while we're pulling those up, I'll call on Alderwoman Tierney. I saw her hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Serving on, or having served on both the Housing committee, or what we want to call it, and this, the council role is vastly different. In the one that where we took the council off, that was more of a bias situation in approving grants, et cetera. And I see this as not that I want to be on a fourth committee, but I think the council at these meetings is very valuable as far as efficiency in the back and forth on what departments do. I think the residents would be a little bit not lost. That's not the right word, but we're a good conduit. I think it's just strictly being a conduit, and this is how this department works, and this is how this and this. And I think it would make the committees the committee more efficient in that respect. So I just wanted to clarify that there really isn't that kind of bias. And I understand Alderman Savage's concern, but I don't think there's any bias in what we do versus what we were doing on the housing, where we were approving grants.
Well, currently the legislation does not remove aldermen from the audit committee. I assume there may be an amendment coming from Alderman Savage that will do that, in which case that discussion would be beneficial. Alderman Arnett, and then we can look at the amendment.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just did look at the amendments. I have to say, I'm liking the idea of having Alderman Payon as chair of this committee and as a member of our finance committee that you and I also serve on. And I was going to make the comment earlier when we were talking about reporting from the committee. Reporting is a two-way street. We don't have to sit by passively and wait for the committee to report. We can actively ask the committee to give us information, particularly we on the finance committee, give us information to help our deliberations. So I can see that as a positive for having the alderpersons in. I actually am much more feeling guilty or uncomfortable about the decisions we made with the Affordable Housing Committee than keeping alderpersons on this committee. But I am also kind of loath to change a whole bunch of things at the same time. I'm not saying it would fail, but I guess I'm more inclined to want to take and see attitude. We have a new mission for the audit committee, and we have, and I don't have a problem with changing it to audit commission if that's the way we're going to go. Changing too many things all at once may invite more problems than add to them. On the other hand, I think that there is some merit to thinking about the committee being able to operate more freely without worrying about, or God forbid, having overbearing alderpersons on the committee that shape and affect the citizen input. So I'll wait till the amendments are offered and we can debate them, but I have to admit I'm pretty ambivalent at this point.
Does everyone have the amendments? Alderman Savage, would you like to introduce? You have two amendments, it appears.
That's correct. Yeah, the first amendment would...
well, one of them's on 4620, not 4520.
Right. Yeah, so the first two amendments are just for 045, and the first one would just essentially reword on page 2. It would adjust a few lines to essentially change it to consist of 4 appointed citizens and 1 member of the Financial Advisory Commission, instead of containing 3. Sorry.
So number 1 would remove city council members, the alderpersons.
Yes.
Okay. And the second amendment, do you want to take them separately?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter too much to me. The second one would just change the name from committee to commission. just so people aren't confused like I did and thought this was a standing committee.
Okay. Let me ask, if we're going to take these together, let me ask Mr. Lyles, is there a difference in committee and commission as far as the alderpersons are concerned? Can alderpersons serve, and I think I know the answer to this because I'm one of the representatives for the Education Commission, but do alderpersons serve on commissions as well as committees?
I was just looking that up in the code and trying to find if there was a differentiation. I would need a few days to get back to you on that. What I see, though, in the charter, you have standing committees, which appear from the reading to be committees solely of the council as subcommittees. I do not see that you have set out in your charter a differentiation between committee and commission. I would suggest, though, that we continue on a path of making differentiations between the two. I just need to help you figure that out by looking at the charter and the code a little more closely and offering some suggestions.
Okay. Well, as you're doing your research, the Education Commission is a commission that we moved from committee to commission several years ago. And there is an alderperson as a liaison, but that liaison is a full member, voting member of the commission. I serve in that committee, so I'm aware. Right. So
let me tell you what I think the difference is, just from the legal perspective without the code of the charter in front of me, is that when the term commission means that you are the council is commissioning or basically hiring for free individuals who are sworn to uphold a certain function in addition to city duties. And a committee is more or less the council deciding on its own to establish either standing committees of its own functions. And I think that those committees should be council. Commissions can be a hybrid, but more or less you're looking for experts from the resident population, the citizen population, to come and tell you something about something you do not know. And it is independent, in my view, should be independent of the council so that you can get the unvarnished truth, so that those individuals, when they're in a room, they won't care about whether Alderperson Finlayson is there taking notes and whether they care about what she thinks, right? So I see that there is a proper role for commission versus committee. I do not think that in every instance that a commission cannot have council people, but I could probably give you a better sense after I've done some review of your code.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kirshner.
Thank you. I guess I'm confused as to what's the problem we're fixing. As I've tried to articulate is we've kind of morphed and emerged and gotten to a place where we're comfortable. The legislation kind of reflects what was done by actually Jared Littman. Then I worked with him, and then when Jim got on the committee, we kind of fine-tuned it, and it reflects our experience. Okay, and I'm asking you guys, I'm asking this committee to honor where we've come from and what we're trying to articulate after 2 years of getting to where we are today. To Alderman Savage, I'd like you to know a lot more about the committee and about how performance excellence and how we're approaching things, and ask you to hold off on your amendments. We can always do it at a later date, but there has been a very positive synergy by having citizen members who bring in. We had, I think, Julie Mussick was a CPA. We've had attorneys. again, it's a kind of a hybrid type committee. The previous city manager very, very quickly brought it to our attention that we are not a standing committee. The city code names the standing committees, and I don't think there's any other reason, any particular reason that we have to say make it a commission or change something that may have implications down the road. We're a city council committee. We are not a standing committee. Everybody understands it that's read the code. I mean, Ms. Sutherland made it very clear, and it was very understandable, and it's based in the city code. So to make a change, again, I don't know what we're trying to fix here. So I would ask you to respect the where this is coming from. It's a year, 2 years of evolution. Really, it's been an evolution, and we've learned a lot. We've changed direction. We now have a new course heading. I'm sending you the email I thought I sent you with my proposal to the chair of our audit committee, and I think all of us feel very comfortable on what direction it's heading. It will head, and kind of say what Alderman Arnett is. I don't know what we want to change here and why, but obviously it's your vote. But okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirshner. Alderman Savage, do you, I presume that you would want to take these two together, but maybe not. So what is your pleasure? Are you introducing, because there wasn't a motion to introduce Amendment 1 or 2.
Well, I think I'll wait on number 2, just in light of the city attorney's comments. He wants some more time to analyze it. And for number 1, I mean, I definitely hear you, Mr. Kirshner. But what I'm wrestling with is I think, well, essentially, I want to try to be consistent with how we treat the boards and the commissions. And I want to, again, avoid some of the potential problems. But I think the amendment itself, taking the alderpersons off of the committee, I don't see how that's going to change fundamentally what you do as a body, and potentially give you another asset in the forms of more citizen members. So, Madam Chair, I think I'd still like to move forward with Amendment 1. But again, if it fails, I'll still support the underlying change because I think it's good. But
so your motion is recommending Amendment 1.
Yes.
Is there a second? I do not hear a second. Alderman Arnett, you're on mute.
I will second for the purposes of debate, but I am not. I'm really ambivalent towards it. I don't want to change too many things all at one time. And as I said, I like the idea of having Alderman Payon or aldermen on this committee, and also some of those aldermen on the finance committee, because I do see these as two bodies that really can work very closely together, particularly since we've now made the performance management system kind of the backbone of the budget document. And I agree with Mr. Kirshner's analysis that, we really need to know what we're getting. We know what the dollar requests are, but we don't know what the performance is. And that's been a missing thing. And I would point out there's a long history of that. Sheila, when you and I first got on the council, Ellen Moyer had a system of performance measures that was the backbone of her budget. And it was actually the first thing we looked at was how did people do in terms of their performance. And that fell by the wayside. Mike Melanoff came up with a performance measurement system. That sort of dropped with administrations. In the Panelides administration, we had performance management budgets. Remember where budgets were divided into quartiles, and we had these huge, big books, and that sort of dropped off. Now we have this new management system I think it's time we get around to the business of doing management systems and making those systems work and making them work for us in terms of giving budgets out. And I think that's, to me, what's most important now, not necessarily the composition of the audit committee itself. So I almost am kind of inclined to say, let's give this a try. If it turns out that there's something that is broken because there's alderpersons on the committee, we always have the option of coming back and working on legislation for that. I wish we could try this and see how it works and come back. So I seconded this for the purpose of debate. I'm probably going to abstain from voting yes or no on the motion.
Thank you, Alderman.
I mean, that's my lukewarm.
I see Alderman Gay has his hand up.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Mr. Kirshner, what was your relation to the committee?
He's on it.
Well, is he the chair? Are you the chairman of the?
No, I'm chairman.
Oh, okay. I didn't know where. I was coming in late to the conversation, so I'm just trying to get caught up on everything, and I really haven't been following the audit committee. So thank you.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor to give a favorable recommendation to Savage Amendment 1. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I was going to say, I'm looking for a hand. All opposed? Aye. Abstention?
Aye. I'm sorry. I cannot make myself go one way or the other.
Did I hear 3 ayes?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, just not all for the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so the motion failed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so Amendment 2, the Savage Amendment 2, is being postponed action, or you're not introducing it here. Okay.
I will move a favorable recommendation to 4520.
Second.
Okay. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of giving 4520 a favorable recommendation, please say aye.
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 Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Fred. That's an extra one. We got 4 votes for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Kirshner, for being with us.
You're welcome. It's good to see you all. Thank you.
Yes, you too.
Stay safe. God bless.
Happy holiday.
Thank you.
All right. The next item is 04620. Public health and safety for the purpose of removing obsolete provisions, authorizing the Department of Public Works to establish regulations governing garbage and refuse, reassigning certain enforcement powers to the Deputy City Manager for resilience and sustainability, creating definitions, clarifying procedures and penalties concerning commercial solid waste collection and contract approval, and generally relating to public health and safety. And Alderwoman Tierney, this is your legislation. Would you like to speak to it?
Sure, yeah. Alderman Arnett and I spoke about this briefly this morning. To be honest with you, this legislation sort of got away from me. Let me be clear that the objective of let me give you background. Downtown, there's a issue with trash pickup, and then also after commercial trucks pick up, it's taking the recycle bin back in. There have been parades and public events where those containers have been out in the middle of the sidewalk, and you know, visitors and pedestrians are seeing trash. And so businesses were complaining, restaurants were complaining that they couldn't get anybody in the morning to bring back in these bins. And so I asked for staff to look at it, because there were separate, there were two places in the code that this was addressed. So that was problem number one. There was language specific to the historic district, and then there was language in this title. So I believe Dr. Nash wrote this legislation, and I think the premise was then, okay, and I don't want to speak for her by any means, but I think the premise was, let's clean this up. A lot of this title is irrelevant. The county does food service. We don't need that. We've introduced a polystyrene ban, so let's delegate who's responsible for that. And I think there's an amendment to change that. And then let's make clear that all the businesses have a permitted hauler, et cetera. And there's a lot of language about that. And so the specific solution to the pickup and all the minutia, I guess, is going to be in regulations that will be issued by the Department of Public Works. And I get that, in the sense that we don't want to codify anything that's going to be that can be in regulations, and also that would be subject to revision, whether it's related to hours and stuff like that. And I get that. But then I'm always asked by businesses, what am I doing? And so I've been having sort of second thoughts and saying, I really need to know what we're doing. So where's the best place to have that? So I'm trying to convince myself on the language about the regulations, and maybe we can have a compromise in this case. But anyway, so that's the background. You can see the title did have to be cleaned up as far as a lot of irrelevant language, but then we did introduce a lot of paragraphs about licensed vendors and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not pleased with the legislation. I think it's a lot of nothing. It's like, tell me what I'm doing. And so I know I sponsor it, and I just think it might need some work to be more clear. So I thank you for letting me be honest.
Well, Alderwoman, let me be honest.
Yeah.
You want to withdraw this legislation until it's ready?
Well, I wanted Dr. Nash to be on the call to explain if this is something that I'm overlooking, if this is the way it's going to be, if this is what is in the best interest. I mean, there's another big part of this is that a lot of this responsibility, well, all of the responsibility went to DPW instead of planning and zoning. So that might be like the main objective of this legislation, and I certainly don't want to stop that. I just have a problem I still don't know what my businesses are doing, or not my businesses, but what the rules are and how we're going to do that. And if I'm confident that we're going to have clear regulations, then it's fine. So I just, before we do that, Madam Chair, I'd like Dr. Nash to just speak to it, and the city attorney as well.
Before I call on Dr. Nash, I saw Mr. Lyles' hand go up. So let me call on Mr. Lyles first, and then Dr. Nash.
Yes, I caution the council and the committee moving this particular piece of legislation forward if in the record we have the sponsor saying that there is lack of clarity as to this piece of legislation, because if it goes south or is challenged by anybody, all they have to do is pull up the video and see this lack of clarity, and it would present a problem, and it would present a problem for us to interpret it, then to enforce it. I think it may be best that we start from the beginning, and my office is open, ready, willing, and able to sit with you and Dr. Nash and go through it, as well as we have some additional amendments from one of the other council members here today that might help suffice to deal with some of the issues, as well as figure out the regulatory scheme. I would find it legally insufficient to go forward given the comments that were made by the sponsor. I apologize for that.
So, Alderwoman Tierney, would you like to withdraw this
Well, I think, I'm a basic principle of just reconsidering what is the objective of this legislation. As I said, it kind of got away from me, and I agree. I'd like to suggest that we withdraw it and go back and maybe do it piece by piece or something.
Okay, I think that we can. Since we haven't taken any motion to support it from this committee, that you can request, and Mr. Lyles, correct me if I'm wrong, you can just request that we take no action on this, which will give you an opportunity to go back and start from scratch or address the insufficiencies.
Madam Chair, if I could make a comment, please.
May I hear from the maker of the motion, the sponsor, please? Ms. Tierney?
Oh, I can make a motion?
Well, no. What would you like for us to do with your legislation? Are you going to, would you like to make a request that we not consider your legislation at this meeting?
Right. I don't want to waste your time, and I'll make an effort of sitting down with Dr. Nash and Michael to readdress.
Thank you. Alderman Arnett, does that take care of your question?
No, I didn't have a question. I had a comment, which is, I think this legislation is inappropriately named, but also I really want to say to the Office of Law that all of these omnibus pieces of legislation, because this is primarily about trash collection and public works, but the title is Public Health and Safety, which is we're taking public health and safety out. So it's misappropriated. So I would ask for more small, digestible pieces of legislation that are very focused on one thing at a time as we go forward. And I'm certainly willing to admit that I've put together omnibus legislation myself, and it's been very complicated. So I'm actually making a request that we, when we do legislation, if we're taking unneeded stuff out, let's do that as a piece of legislation. If we're changing trash collection, let's do that as a piece of legislation, and so forth. And I would also note to the committee that I do have a piece of legislation in with the Office of Law having to do with promulgation of rules and regulations. And that is the one thing about this that I had some concerns, because it is appropriately following Title II 04090 in terms of putting in the code the directive to write rules and regulations. I want to make sure that we all have an agreed upon process for promulgating rules and regulations. That'll take care of itself subsequently.
Alderman Arnett, you will have an opportunity to introduce your legislation at the appropriate time.
I wanted to introduce it now.
No, thank you. Alderwoman Tierney, and then we're going on.
Yeah, that's a valid point, though, because I heard this chatter, and not chatter, but I understand that Alderman Arnett is very concerned about regulations, and so I think we have to have that discussion. I'm not sure how, if his legislation is ready or whatever, but we have to know what we're doing with regulations, because that's a big part of this. This does bring up the whole issue of putting regulations in the code or not, and I think this could have brought that discussion, and that was the only reason why I wanted to move it forward to have that discussion, but that's not worth it to do that. But I think we need to decide on how we want to handle regulations, and if the council needs to look at them, and because I think we all have different opinions about that.
Maybe at a future Rules Committee meeting, we can sit down with Mr. Lyles and talk about how we handle regulations versus procedures. Right now, we're in legislative action. So we will go on to the next piece of legislation, which is R1720, Annual Statement of Performance Standards. And I know we have several amendments. Alderman Arnett?
Yes, Madam Chair. I promised you at the last Rules Committee meeting that I would come back to the committee with some specific recommendations for this. They're primarily focused on having the performance measures reflect the current structure of city government. So if you look at the R17, the very first thing in there is performance measures for the Office of Environmental Policy, which no longer exists. And so my first amendment is to take the Office of Environmental Policy out of the performance measures standards. The legislation that created the deputy city manager for resilience and sustainability subsumed some of those duties from the old Office of Environmental Policy. But that same legislation also did other things by creating a floodplain administrator in planning and zoning. And so I think that should be reflected in planning and zoning's performance measures. There was also for planning and zoning legislation that talked about managing the street trees. I think there was already legislation in their code, but again, there were changes made there. Same thing for adding a floodplain administrator in planning and zoning. And then there were duties, and I'm going through, that was Amendment 4, Amendment 5. There were duties added to the deputy city manager with regard to the clean energy loan program. And then I could not do an amendment, but there are things that are carried over from the old Office of Environmental Policy to the new deputy city manager's office, the kinds of things that Racine Hodo works on. And I think those need to be delineated in the deputy city manager's duties, which brings up the question of in performance measures, is there a performance measures for the city manager or at least for the deputy city manager? And how do we handle that when there are basically line functions being done out of the deputy city manager's office, but there's no performance measures for those things?
Alderman, I'm looking at your amendments because you've given us 6 amendments without specifics on where the changes should be.
And that's because there is no line item that you can refer to. We have in the performance measures, we have that broken out by department and then goals and benchmarks and so forth. So I'm not really sure how you make the amendments to that document. Well,
fortunately, Mr. Lyles' hand is up.
Good. You are so right, fortunately.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure that these amendments are appropriate for this particular resolution. This resolution just asks the council to accept what has already been filed. And what has been filed relates more so to what was than what is. And if there are going to be changes, I think the performance measures and offices to which they go need to be reflective in any change, especially going forward. I do not also see that the city manager has a performance measure, since the departments are under the city manager, and the deputy city manager, as you have arranged the duties of that position, do not have an office with authority in the same manner as the city manager and the departments. So I think there may be some confusion about what's going on with this particular resolution. It's really looking at those things that have already been filed and accepting those. And maybe we need to think about something else with respect to Alderman Arnett's comments, and not so much an amendment for this particular resolution.
Well, I was getting ready to say, let me call on our city manager, and he raises his hand. Perfect timing. Thank you, Mr. Gerald.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Yeah, as we've talked about in the past on these, what we would really like is for these to be accepted. This is an annual requirement that we submit these, and believe it or not, these have been submitted since last spring sometime. And we're actually preparing updates to submit in February as required. So I think all of the changes that are proposed in the amendments are all very valid, and we need to incorporate those into this next revision that will be coming in for the FY22 budget. What we plan to do with the submission now is to keep the performance measures as they are, as they were submitted, provide 6 months worth of performance data. So for the first half of FY21, and then also to incorporate any of these changes that are being mentioned. But as we talked about during the audit committee discussion, we plan to take advantage of that $25,000 that the audit committee is encouraging us to use to improve the performance measurement system, to hire a consultant, to rework the performance measures that we have now, to make them more parallel and more consistent and more all-inclusive of what we want to look at. And then we would submit those in February of 2022. So we'll take a year to do that process because there's no way we can get it done before the submission in next February. So we'll stick with these same ones with the changes noted by Alderman Arnett, provides the performance data that's been maintained by the departments. So hopefully that'll be useful to the Finance Committee. And then we'll revamp the performance measures and the performance standards for the next submission a year later.
So am I hearing you say that you will take these 6 amendments and be able to incorporate them into procedures, anyway, take them as guidance?
Yeah, I think most of them are more organizationally driven, right? Because we move from one department to another, or move the OEM stuff, some of it to planning and zoning, some of it to deputy city manager. So we'll just move those organizationally, but I don't think that there'll be significant changes because we haven't been measuring for anything that's added to the performance measures. We haven't been collecting the data, so it'll be difficult to reflect that in what we report. But for those that were already in the system and are being collected, and it's just a matter of moving them to a different organization, we can certainly do that.
Okay. Alderman Arnett, does that satisfy your concern about all of these things?
I'm not sure, but I need a little bit of time to think. I guess my concern is when we get this next budget, what is the performance measurement backbone of the budget going to look like? If it's still got an Office of Environmental Policy in it, I won't vote for that. I'm not in favor of that. I would like the budget, the performance measurement as used in the budget, to reflect the existing structure, which is the new structure with a deputy city manager for resiliency and sustainability, and no Office of Environmental Policy, and also some new programs that were in the legislation creating it. I think I heard Mr. Gerald say he was going to do that, and if that's the case, I don't need extra work.
Yeah, so we're not going to add new performance measures because we've been measuring based on these originally submitted, but where it's just a change of organization, we'll make those changes and provide those performance measures that are already, and like the OEM ones, we'll subdivide between planning and zoning and deputy city manager as appropriate to whichever organization has that, and report them that way.
Right.
But there won't be new performance measures added.
Madam Chair.
Do we have 2 OEMs?
No,
I thought
OEM
was
OEP.
Office of Emergency
OEP.
I'm sorry, OEP.
Okay, sorry. But this legislation does not make this legislation simply says that we're going to approve what was presented to us in, I guess, in the spring. Is that correct, Mr. Gerald, Mr. Lyles?
Yes.
So this is what we're acting on right now. Alderman Arnett, I hope you've been satisfied with Mr. Gerald's decision he will oversee the implementation and the movement of practices into the respective departments as the city manager. That is,
I'm not satisfied if I can get a chance to speak here.
Well, when your turn comes, I will get to.
I've been hand up for the past 15 minutes on two pieces of legislation.
Not true. Okay. Mr. Gerald, or Mr. Alderman Arnett, since this is your amendment, these are your amendments.
I will be happy to withdraw my amendments because City Manager Gerald said he's going to put them in place. I am not happy to vote for the resolution because it does not reflect our current performance system. But I'll wait to see what Alderman Savage says.
All right, Alderman Savage, it is your turn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so I just agree with our colleague there, Alderman Arnett. I also sent out proposed amendments, although I completely understand from the city attorney. I'm not sure how we can't actually amend it. It's an attached document, but in any case, I think this needs to get pulled and reintroduced. I sent out to everybody, I think, including the city manager, some of the proposed performance standards because they're, in addition to not reflecting our current structure, there are entire environmental programs that aren't even mentioned in these performance standards. There's nothing about the application of the street tree program, the Chapter 14. There's nothing in there about the Forest Conservation Act or the Sediment Control Code or the Stormwater Management. And those are all programs that we've had a lot of public concern and support expressed for in the past. And I think it's really important and crucial for us to have some kind of performance standards. And that really should have been in place anyway, prior even to the reorganization, because those programs stayed with the same departments. Sediment control was always with Public Works. Stormwater was always with them. The only thing that changed was the street tree program. Forest conservation was always with planning and zoning. So they should have had performance standards even from the get-go. So I don't think this would take too long to adjust. I don't know if the administration would want to pull legislation or just swap out the attachment. I don't know if they can do that procedurally either. But it took me about an hour to develop these half a dozen or so standards. So I know Alderman Arnett wants to have a more robust, and the Audit Committee to have a more robust system for performance standards, but I think we can really adjust these within a reasonable amount of time and make them at least better than what we have until we get this more robust system in place. But I can't support it until these holes are filled.
So what is your pleasure as far as acting on R1720? Is there a motion to support, motion to oppose, motion to postpone?
I'd move that we recommend unfavorably.
So that motion dies for lack of a second. Is there another motion?
I'm sorry. I said second.
Everything froze up on me.
I did not hear you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There's a motion.
Madam Chair, can you mention that again? Because everything froze up on me. I didn't see.
The motion on the floor is to oppose R1720.
Recommend unfavorably.
It's been properly moved and
seconded.
Yes, to oppose it. Recommend unfavorably, same thing. Alderman Savage.
Well, I do want to discuss because I don't think it's, I don't think it's worth. I don't want to oppose this because I do think we need to have some performance standards in place. So I guess maybe on second thought, maybe we should just postpone this because I think even if we can just fill a couple of these holes, I think this is something we can, and reflect our current organizational makeup. Again, this is something I think that could be done in 2 hours. I don't see why we don't do that so we can get this on the books. I think we're better getting that fixed and passed than we are not passing anything.
1 second.
Mr. Lyles, there's a motion on the floor, first of all, to oppose. So we have to get rid of that motion. So the motion on the floor is to oppose.
I withdraw my second.
Okay. All right. Mr. Lyles, your hand went up.
No, I'm just waiting for the result now.
Okay, so the motion that was to oppose has died now for lack of a second. Okay, so that's where we are. So is there another motion? Did you not just say you wanted to move to postpone?
I guess postpone or no action. I just don't see. I guess I'm looking for an answer from the city manager. Is this going to be changed at all, or is this what you're moving forward with?
This is an interesting one, right? Because we put this together last spring. This was what was put in place. This is what the department started collecting performance data based on. And so at this point, to change it, I don't even know what that means. I mean, we have to resubmit this in February. We're going to resubmit it with the proper organizational structure shown. But this is what we've been using. So this is submitted to you of us saying these are the performance standards. This is the performance management system that we're using. Please accept it. Please acknowledge it. I'm not sure it's please approve it. I think it's submitted for acceptance. This is what we're doing. We're certainly open to any comments, and I think that, and I think we indicated this early on, that the environmental performance measures that Alderman Savage brought up should have been included, and we agreed to include those. Now, whether we've been collecting data based on those, I don't know, but those should have been included and will be. But you know, this is 9 months down the road from us putting this together and starting to collect performance data. So it's difficult at this point to say you guys aren't going to approve it, and for us to somehow change course on this. We're going to change course going forward when we hire the consultant to help us revamp this, because I don't think it's quite where we need it to be. But right now it is what it is, and we've been collecting data based on it for this entire fiscal year. And like I said, we're getting ready to submit the new one, and there will be some changes made to that, but that will likewise be not quite there, but it will also ask you to accept that that's the annual report on the performance measurement system.
Thank you. Mr. Lyles?
Yes, given the structure of your voting, if you don't accept it, take it, receive it, it's likely that you won't have one filed before the new one is ready. So if you're 95 or 99% that it's good to go, you may be in a better position to suggest whatever changes so that the next one is reflective of your desires on the performance. Because right now you might have a hole in your performance years, because this one is likely not going to be accepted before the next one is presented to you by the city manager. I don't know what that does for your performance review mechanism, but I'm just stating kind of procedurally what will happen.
Alderman Savage?
Well, for the city manager, what's the timeline on getting somebody hired, and when are they gonna? What do you desire for when you want to see results from them? A draft.
Yeah, so we hope to use the $25,000 and to hire or to interview some firms and to hire someone next year, early next year, and then those would be ready for a year from February. So we owe updates every year in February to the council on the performance management system. So we don't have time to do it this year for revamping. So we're going to report, like I said, on the performance measures that you have. We're going to report on those for the first 6 months of this fiscal year. Normally it's a lagging indicator. So normally in February, you would get a report on the previous fiscal year, the entirety of the previous fiscal year. Since these were just put into place and we've been collecting data for FY21 starting July 1st, we're going to report on the first 6 months of performance data. But then we would hope that in February of 2022 that we would be able to submit the revised performance measures with the data that's collected.
Sorry, so if you hire somebody, you said February ideally, when would you want to get their new standards? So when would you start applying their new standards? I guess that's my question.
Well, we would hope to have those in place so we would start collecting the data for that next July, because we do it on a fiscal year basis. So if we hire them early next year, then those should be in place to start on July 1st, collecting the data. July 1st of 2021. And I think a lot of the performance measures will stay the same. I think they may be recrafted, but the basic, number of miles of streets that are paved each year, some of those really common ones will stay the same. They may change in format or in structure somewhat, but I think that a lot of them will stay basically the same and just be restructured. So new standards will be applied in July of 2021, or are you saying 22? That's our anticipation. So that would be FY22, January or July 1st of 21. So would be the start of FY22. The start of FY22. Okay. I mean, because I'll admit I am frustrated. You could probably tell because I did first submit my concerns back. I'm looking at my emails March 10th, right when after this legislation was introduced in February. I said, hey, there are these deficiencies. This is even before we reorganized. Hey, there are these deficiencies. These entire environmental programs have no performance standards. And we've both received an incredible amount of complaints about these programs. We need to have standards. And again, so yes, I'm frustrated. I apparently have gone unheard since March of 10th of 2020. And here we are. I'm saying the same thing again. No change to these standards. I mean, this could have been pulled back then. Maybe new standards could have been made and swapped out. So we're in a tough position here.
Director Gerald and then Alderman Arnett.
Yeah, so I think those are actually, we're collecting data based on those. So we had no mechanism to actually add those. We didn't pull it back because this kept going on, and we thought those were going to be incorporated by amendment. But I think that we've incorporated them into the practice of collecting measures for those, or collecting data for those measures. So I'll check with Jackie, but I think that is being done, Alderman Savage, because we all acknowledge that those were necessary and were very valid performance measures.
Alderman Arnett.
Madam Chair, I move the Rules Committee take no action on this resolution.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and properly seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of taking no action on R1720, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda, which I managed to bury,
044.
is 04420, employee organizations. For the purpose of removing the deadline for employee organizations to petition the city for recognition as an exclusive bargaining agent for eligible government personnel. And I see Alderman Schendelmeyer, who is with us this evening, the sponsor of this ordinance. Mr. Schendelmeyer, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate you working around my schedule. I apologize for not being able to jump on in the beginning. So the idea of mine when I had for this bill was actually coming up with having a conversation with Alderman Savage, who had previously tried to form a union, but because it was not submitted, the paperwork to form was not submitted in October, it was rejected. I did some conversations and talked a little bit with other union representatives and other city employees, and I found out this has happened a couple of times. I will say that there was originally some lack of clarification on when the negotiations would begin, but I had a conversation with Human Resources today, and I submitted the new language that irons out those problems to the committee.
Ms. Green, do we have that amendment?
I sent it to the committee members and to City Manager David Gerald a couple of hours ago. So I did not send it to Ms. Green. I apologize.
I do have it, Madam Chair.
But it stresses and puts in the code that representation will begin during the next open collective bargaining session.
And
okay, bear with me one moment, please.
Certainly.
Certainly.
Your amendment is in letter D. Is that what, am I saying that correctly?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, printing that out. Okay, so do you want to tell us, I know there were some questions that were raised during our last meeting about timing. So can you tell me how this addresses the concern?
It addresses the concerns by putting into the code when the next collective bargaining agreement will take effect. So we don't have this weird wiggle room. Previously, it was guessed, we didn't have this actually confirmed, why we only accepted in October because of some budget related issues to give time to negotiate and incorporate that into the budget debate and the discussions amongst the council. But by putting in this language, we ensure that we still have that guideline and that if they submit it after the month of October, then they have missed that deadline for that year's collective bargaining agreement, and it will take effect for the next collective bargaining agreement. But they have the barrier of forming their union overcome. So.
Okay. And well, let's see, are there any other questions? I know I'll call on Alderman Arnett, and then Savage, and then Gay, and then City Manager Gerald.
So, Brooks, on the thing I have, there's a section under D that is in yellow, and there's a section that is in green. The section that is in green still mentions October 31st. So I'm trying to make sense. The representation will begin during the next open collective bargaining session for those recognized positions that have been submitted no later than October 31st of the prior year. Then why are we striking October 31st back up in section A? It almost seems like you take it out of one place and put it in another.
So what that does is it gives us the opportunity to still get that little bit of time and barrier to negotiate in the budget, but they are allowed to submit those petitions earlier in the year if they are working on
so it says no later than October. What does it say in A? So, all right, well, it just seems like that's in conflict. A says a petition may not be accepted by the city unless filed by an employee organization during the month. Okay, so it's any time before October, not just in October. Gotcha. All right.
Correct. So I could file this in January, February, March, April, May, June, whatever. We still have that October 31st cutoff for the next collective bargaining discussions, but they can still submit it any time of the month and incorporate into that next collective bargaining discussion.
So, Madam Chair, at the last meeting, it was I think I remember Trish worrying about how this would affect the budgeting. This seems like that addresses it. And it opens it up so you can do it. You can do it anytime, but it tells you if you don't do it before such and such a date, October 31st, it's not going to get in the hopper for recognition in the next budget session.
Correct. And that is language that came in directly from Tricia that I incorporated into the bill. So, yeah.
And the thing that we're fixing is that people, because they didn't submit in October, had to wait a whole year to resubmit. And has that happened a lot?
Not a lot, but it has happened. And my general rule of thumb on this is we are seeing attacks on public employee unions at a lot of levels. And so maybe this is me trying to essentially eliminate on our city a potential barrier for that. Just because we have a current administration that is friendly to people's right to organize doesn't mean we always will. And so I want to do what I can to make sure that our public employees have the right to organize and they're a little more defended from that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think Alderman Savage was next, and then Alderman Gay.
I think we lost Alderman Savage.
Alderman Savage seems to have disappeared. Alderman Gay.
Yeah, thanks. Ross kind of hinted at some of my questions, but I just still would like it clarified by whomever can. How are we sure that this does not impact us, down the line? I will point to the two comments that I made at our last meeting, but again, we didn't have a chance to have discussion. The previous negotiations with the union and my very first budget, were tense at times. And it often felt that we were on our own and trying to prepare for what we know now is a total deficit. And so how can we be sure that allowing workers the right to unionize further won't put us in any sticky situations moving forward that could be costly?
Because Americans have the right to organize, and I feel really uncomfortable going and implementing barriers that hurt that as a way to solve our budget woes.
And so how many employees are currently, I asked this the last time, but we didn't really get I thought we were supposed to get a small report on it. How many employees are currently not in a union?
I do not have that information.
City Manager Gerald.
I can look up in the budget real quick and get that number, but it's a little over 50% of the total workforce is not represented.
And so this would allow that 50% to unionize in some way, shape, or form if their overall job description allows for it. I don't think I'm against the idea of unionizing for, obvious reasons. It's important that, our employees have a voice, but how can we move forward without, really making it difficult for ourselves to negotiate moving forward? Or what securities can we afford ourselves even further? Maybe from the perspective of the Office of Law.
This is probably not the best forum, Madam Chair, for this kind of discussion, although we'd be happy to answer some of those more technical issues with respect to labor unions. But this is because we're probably engaging in union negotiations now. And we will begin to do that in about a year for the next collective bargaining agreement. I would think we just want to back off on that just a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Lyles. I was going to respond, but I don't need to now, so thank you. Alderman Gay, was that your...
I guess just in follow-up, will we have an opportunity then maybe to do a closed session on this specific piece of legislation so that we can get an idea of some, or just have further discussion about that?
I guess we can have a closed session on anything we'd like. I think it is important that we understand the role of unions and the rights of all employees, regardless of what they're doing. There are some things that we don't control, like the right of employees to organize. So anyway, I think we can have that discussion. Mr. Gerald and Mr. Alderman Savage.
Sorry, Alderman Savage. I know you were way before me, but just one real quick clarification.
He left the room.
So all of this does is, instead of the employee organizations filing in the month of October, now they can file earlier than the month of October. That's all this does. They still have all the rights to organize. That doesn't change anything. All it does is changes that time frame when they can file with the city.
That makes it easier.
I think what I heard Alderman Gay saying was, would that impact our fiscal position by allowing them to organize? I think that's what you were getting to. I know, I'm sorry. I take that back.
Yeah.
Alderman Savage.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair. And sorry, my technical difficulties. I got back as soon as I could. So I missed the first half of your question, Alderman Gay, but I think I get the gist. But I do want to just reiterate that this legislation, it doesn't do anything to, it's not going to change the fact that people can organize whenever they want to organize. This isn't going to increase the amount of people who can join a union or the likelihood of that. It's not going to change that. All it does is make it a little more convenient in the sense that they don't have to wait until October to submit their petitions. They can go ahead and do all the groundwork in whatever, August or even earlier, and just get that on record with the city. But it's not going to impact the budget whatsoever. And we have and maybe the city attorney's already said this, but we can't, there's only so far we can regulate, if I'm using the right word, I guess, in this instance, people's right to join a union. That is a federal right. So we can't, I mean, the city attorney honestly knows the details better than I, but that's my understanding.
Mr. Lyles, did you want to respond to that? And then Alderman Matt.
Yeah, the code, when the code involves itself in labor issues, it is really stepping into an area that is already regulated. So that's one thing. The code says, send us something in one part of the year versus another part of the year. People who want to unionize can do it whenever they want to, right? And they can organize whenever they want to. The only question for the city, and I think this is where the legislation may be a little unclear, is that it doesn't regulate when you form, how you form, and what you can do with the city with respect to negotiations. It just indicates an optimal time for consideration of the budgetary connection to unionizing. And really, that's really all it is. And it really doesn't impact and never impacted someone unionizing. So I'm not really sure what happened in the past with that communication between those who would unionize and the city, but it's really only a budgetary convention more so than regulating unionizing.
Alderman Arnett.
Madam Chair, before we dig ourselves into any deeper a hole, I move we recommend favorably to the City Council. Whatever it is, 4420.
4420.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of giving 4420 a favorable recommendation, please say aye.
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 All right. Thank you very much. Well, it looks like we have exhausted our agenda, and I'm sure you all are duly exhausted after the monthly meeting. So If there's no further business, Mr. Lyles, was that your hand up?
Oh, just adjusting my glasses, ma'am.
Oh, okay. I didn't want to miss. Okay.
I was crying. I was crying.
Yeah, right.
Sorry.
Madam Chair, I move we adjourn.
Okay. There's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your week.
Thank
See
you.
on Monday, the 21st. Take care. Be safe.